A strange silence suddenly blanketed Deloria, the most prestigious restaurant in the heart of Manhattan, a place that had welcomed politicians, movie stars, and the top tier of the financial elite. The subtle clinking of cutlery came to a halt, as if the air itself had been sucked from the room by something utterly unexpected. At the corner table with the finest view, Alexander Rains, a legendary billionaire in the tech investment world, dashing in appearance but cold in the eyes, abruptly stood up. The tailored navy suit he wore caught the chandelier light, enhancing an aura of dominance that silenced every gaze. Across from him stood Camila Brooks, a petite black waitress, trying to steady the wine tray in her hands, though her fingers trembled slightly. Her face revealed tension, but she refused to let weakness show. Alexander's voice rang out. Not loud, but each word cut through the quiet like a blade. A place like Deloria. And they let someone like you serve me. The entire restaurant froze. A sentence that sounded simple but sliced like a knife. His eyes scanned Camila as if appraising an object misplaced in this polished world. Camila remained still, her dignity crushed but her gaze unflinching. No one spoke. But diners began to sense they weren't just witnesses to a high-end dinner, they might be witnessing something more important, the stirring of justice. Camila's gaze never wavered. No flinch, no protest, but no retreat either. She didn't need to speak for people to understand she was not just a server. Born in a hidden corner of the Bronx, Camila grew up in a cramped neighborhood of peeling walls and leaky roofs. Her mother, a school janitor, often worked night shifts to afford medicine for Camila's younger brother, who suffered from chronic asthma. Her father disappeared when she was 6. No letter, no explanation. Her childhood was spent alone on stoops counting passing cars, dreaming of a world where people didn't look at her with suspicion because of her skin. In high school, she was used to whispers like, "Not sure this girl will keep up in honors class." She never answered back, but in her heart, Camila recorded every word, as rungs in the quiet ladder she had to climb. She graduated with honors. She studied ballet. She once dreamed of becoming a professional dancer. But those dreams gave way to reality when she got pregnant with Lily at 20, the result of a fleeting romance with a boyfriend who vanished upon hearing the news. Camila didn't blame life, but from that day forward, every choice revolved around one thing, giving her daughter a future more dignified than her own. And that's why she stood at Deloria. Not to bow, but to create opportunity, not to be accepted, but to prove that she deserved to exist wherever decency should reside. From the very first day she set foot in Deloria, Camila understood one thing. Her presence there was never fully welcomed, even if no one said it out loud. The restaurant's reputation wasn't built solely on refined cuisine or sparkling chandeliers, but on its spatial harmony, where everything from the music to the staff was curated to match a specific definition of luxury. And someone like Camila, with her brown skin and voice as soft as breeze, didn't quite fit in many eyes. No one insulted her outright. But every time she entered the staff lounge, conversations fell silent. Guest compliments were shared in team chats, but Camila's name was often left out. Once she overheard Emma, a white colleague, whispering to Caroline, "She's just here to make the diversity chart look good." Yeah, the way she holds a wine glass, you can tell she's not used to serving the wealthy. Camila said nothing. But that night she stayed late after hours quietly polishing glasses until her hands were raw, as if scrubbing away every label the world tried to stamp on her. She arrived earlier than anyone, memorized every vintage of every wine, learned to read guests' eyes before they even spoke. Every detail, every rhythm of service she turned into art, not for applause, but to exist with her dignity intact. And though there were nights she fell asleep at the kitchen table beside an untouched meal, Camila believed her silence wasn't surrender. It was a vow that someday the world would listen. That evening, Deloria's atmosphere was unusually tense. The headwaiters moved briskly, and the manager's eyes scanned the VIP rows like he was bracing for a quiet storm. And it arrived, right on time, unmistakable in posture, in a charcoal Tom Ford suit. Alexander Rains entered like a walking proclamation. Without saying a word, he made people avoid eye contact. Some whispered his name. Others glanced quickly and looked away. His presence was like a sudden chill in an otherwise warm room. Camila wasn't initially assigned to table 6, where Alexander sat. That was Julian's table, a veteran waiter known for diffusing difficult guests with a practiced smile. But then it happened. Too fast. Julian slipped in the kitchen, twisted his ankle, and had to clock out. The manager turned to Camila, eyes hesitant. "Camila, there's no one else. Can you cover this table for me?" She looked toward table 6. Alexander sat alone, flipping the menu without reading his fingers, tapping the table like counting down delays. Camila nodded. Walking toward him, she felt her heartbeat thumping like every step pressed against an invisible wall, but she kept walking, slow, steady like always. "Good evening, Mr. Rains. My name is Camila. I'll be your server tonight." Alexander looked up. That first glance, cold as steel, piercing without words, would have made many shrink. But Camila stood tall. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. He smirked. "Camila, is it interesting? I've been to Paris, Milan, Tokyo, never seen anyone like you serving in establishments of this caliber. No one nearby heard clearly, but Camila did. Every word sat heavy on her chest, but she didn't step back. "Sir," she replied gently, "I believe excellence in service is defined by quality, not by the color of the server's skin." The confrontation began, not with shouting, but with frozen civility and a pride that refused to be crushed. Camila placed the Wagyu steak in front of Alexander Rains, with a practiced motion flawless and precise. Though beads of sweat glistened at the nape of her neck under the chandelier's light, her hands remained steady, her voice unwavering. "Here is your order. A5 Wagyu, medium rare. Enjoy your meal, sir." Alexander didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked Camila up and down, his eyes openly filled with disdain. Then he spoke. Not loudly, but loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You know, I always thought Deloria maintained its standards. But it seems they're lowering the bar just to polish their diversity stats." A verbal slash cut through the air, sharp and painful. A few diners turned their heads. A pair of lips tightened. A gaze lingered. Camila paused for a second. All the unnamed wounds rushed back. The mocking comments in the break room, the glances that passed through her like she didn't exist, the hesitant questions from customers. "You're new here, or do you even know the full menu?" But this time, Camila didn't remain silent. She lifted her head, eyes steady. Her voice wasn't raised, but each word rang clearly through the dining room, falling into a hush. "Sir, you can buy the finest steak, but you cannot buy decency." A beat, a wine glass frozen midair, a whisper dropped to the carpet. Alexander froze. For a moment, the entire restaurant stood still. Even the pianist, who usually played without pause, stopped. Notes hung suspended above the keys. Camila did not apologize. She simply stood there, quiet yet unshakable, like a candle in the wind refusing to be extinguished by arrogance. Camila's words echoed in everyone's minds long after she had stepped back, making space for the storm now simmering in front of her. Alexander Rains sat frozen for a few seconds, as if someone had just insulted him in public, something he was not accustomed to. His fist-clenched knuckles turning white as he slammed it down on the table. "You just insulted me in front of dozens of people. Do you even know who I am?" The sharp sound shattered the frozen air. A few diners leaned forward, others lowered their heads. And at the center of it all, Camila, though her heart pounded like a war drum, stood tall. "I know who you are, Mr. Rains, but that doesn't give you the right to belittle anyone." Mr. Davis, the restaurant manager, had appeared somehow without notice. His face had gone pale, eyes darting between Camila and the most powerful guest of the night. Alexander said nothing more. He stood abruptly, tossed his napkin aside, fury blazing in his eyes. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure no restaurant in this city ever hires you again." He stormed out of Deloria, leaving behind a gently trembling glass door and an atmosphere thick with tension, where everyone could only look at each other and at Camila, the woman who had broken the silence with a kind of courage few dared to show. After the guest left, Mr. Davis approached Camila, his voice low. "Camila, do you realize how far this could go?" She nodded. Her eyes weren't panicked, only deeply aware I do. But if I stayed silent today, I wouldn't recognize myself tomorrow. The manager said nothing. The room remained silent, but somewhere in that stillness, something shifted. Something more powerful than the anger of wealth or status, empathy. Less than an hour after Alexander Rains stormed out of Deloria, the glass doors swung open once again, this time without warning, without anyone announcing his arrival. He had returned, but not alone. Two men in black suits flanked him closely, bodyguards. Stone-faced, their eyes scanned the room as if locating a target. Alexander, meanwhile, had eyes only for Camila. His stare locked onto her like a heat-seeking radar. Rage, humiliation, and a thirst for vengeance tangled in one furious glare. The entire restaurant went silent once more. Mr. Davis hurried forward. "Mr. Rains?" Alexander raised a hand, cutting him off without a glance. "I'm not here to eat. I'm here to clarify something." He marched directly to Camila, towering over her, but she didn't move. She stood her ground. Not defiant, not afraid, simply calm, ready to face whatever came so long as she didn't lose her dignity. "You think a few kind words will save you?" Alexander hissed, each word cold and sharp as steel. "You humiliated me in public, and trust me, you will pay." Camila said nothing. Her breath remained steady, but her lips pressed tight, her chest rising and falling, and her hands gripped the edge of her apron. Alexander leaned in, voice lower, but even more menacing. "I'll call every contact I have in this industry. No restaurant will dare hire you. You and your daughter won't survive in this city unless you apologize." The room held its breath. A few servers exchanged worried glances. But Camila stepped forward half a pace. Her voice was soft, yet it carried to the farthest corner. "I didn't insult you, Mr. Rains. I simply refuse to accept your insult. If that angers you, that's not my fault." Alexander stood stunned. One beat. Two. Surprise flickered across his face, then was consumed by thunderous rage. Without another word, he spun around and stormed out of the restaurant again, but this time without the same aura of untouchable power. Behind him, the heavy silence slowly gave way to astonished stares. Then a quiet clap, then a second. Then the entire room erupted in applause unprompted. Camila didn't smile, but in her eyes, something had just been set free. Liberation. The doors of Deloria closed behind Alexander Rains for the second time, but this time, no threats lingered. Only the residue of anger hovered in the air as a strange stillness wrapped around the restaurant like a veil of mist. Camila still stood in place, breathing heavily, her eyes trying to remain composed, but her head never bowed. Then, from a corner table near the stage, a middle-aged woman stood up. Dressed in deep red velvet, her seasoned eyes shimmered with compassion. She walked up to Camila and gently placed her hand on her arm. "You just did what most people wouldn't dare do. You stood up for yourself, in front of a man who could destroy your whole career." Camila was speechless. She only managed a soft nod. But the woman gave her arm a reassuring squeeze. "You weren't wrong, and you are not alone." It began there. Then came an older man stepping from his table, voice low but firm. "I've witnessed a lot of injustice in my life, but never someone face it with such calm. You reminded us. Sometimes silent complicity is worse than open insults." And then one by one, table by table, people began to rise. Not loudly, no fanfare, just quiet words. "I'm proud I was here tonight. You didn't just serve dinner. You served a wake-up call. People need to hear this story. The world needs to hear it." A fellow co-worker came forward, clutching a napkin, voice trembling. I'm sorry I stayed silent for so long." Camila said nothing, but as she looked around for the first time after countless quiet shifts, she saw gazes that no longer held doubt or judgment, but respect. And deep in her heart, Camila understood. She had awakened something far bigger than herself, the belief that even in the most refined places there is room for integrity to rise. The next morning, Deloria felt different. Inside the large office upstairs, all staff head chef servers, receptionists, and senior managers were present. Every appointment had been canceled, and the entire restaurant was closed for 2 hours. An emergency meeting, something rare in a place that usually ran like a Swiss watch. At the head of the table stood Marianne Deloria, the founder and owner, a white woman in her 60s, known as a symbol of refinement and authority in the fine dining industry. She seldom appeared before the entire staff, but today she stood there quiet, solemn, her eyes fixed on the steaming cup of tea in her hand. A full minute passed in silence. Then she looked up. "I believe everyone knows what happened last night." Her voice was gentle but echoed through the room as if the very walls were listening. "Alexander Rains is an influential figure. No one denies that. But influence is not a license to insult, humiliate, or trample on someone's dignity, especially someone who is devoted to serving inside my own restaurant." All eyes turned to Camila, seated humbly in a corner. She didn't move, but her hand resting on her lap tightened slightly. Deloria was built not just on cuisine, but on principles. And if we don't stand by an employee when she does the right thing, then every value we boast is meaningless. Marianne stepped away from the head of the table, walking directly to Camila. No theatrics, no drama. She simply placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Camila, you didn't just make me proud. You reminded me why I started this restaurant in the first place." Then she turned to the room. "I know Mr. Rains won't let this go. I know there will be pressure, but I would rather lose a few powerful patrons than lose the decency within my team." The room was silent. Then applause broke out, not orchestrated, not commanded, just raw emotion flowing from awakened hearts. Camila bowed her head, tears falling onto the back of her hand. But this time they weren't tears of hurt. They were the tears of someone who for the first time was truly protected by a place she once thought of as just her workplace. Less than 24 hours later, a video clip of the confrontation between Camila Brooks and Alexander Rains surfaced online. A nearby diner had quietly recorded the moment from Rains's cold gaze to Camila's calm, resolute response. No sensationalism, no editing, just raw truth, and that was exactly why it spread like wildfire. Within a day, the hashtag #StandWithCamila soared to the top of Twitter. Tweets flooded in. She didn't shout or act out. She just stood her ground and made a powerful man walk out of a restaurant. I cried when she said, "You can buy a steak, sir, but not decency." No one deserves to be humiliated like that, especially a mother doing her best for her child. Major news outlets reached out. Morning talk shows competed for interviews. Celebrities reshared the story. A female senator even posted a lengthy message of support calling Camila the face of modern courage. But not all the attention was positive. Some defended Alexander Rains. Far-right media painted Camila as a waitress acting to get famous. She received anonymous messages, threat slurs. Paparazzi even followed her back to her modest apartment in Queens. Camila shut off her phone for a few days. She didn't know how to handle the press. She wasn't used to being called an accidental hero. She was just a single mom trying to live quietly and kindly without drawing attention. But now the eyes of a nation were on her, not because she sought it, but because one honest act had touched a nerve buried deep in America's heart where ordinary people were growing weary of staying silent. Tuesday morning, the Manhattan sky was pale gray mist drifting like smoke across car windows. Camila entered Deloria trying to keep her breathing steady. She hadn't slept all night. The media wouldn't let up even after the restaurant's public statement defending her. Everything felt like a storm dragging her along without pause. Just as she changed into her uniform, Manager Davis stepped into the break room. Something about his face was different, no longer tense, but expectant. "Camila, someone would like to meet you. A very special guest." "Who is it?" she asked softly, heart uneasy. "It's best if you meet him yourself. VIP room at the end of the hall." Camila walked slowly down the hallway, heart pounding in her chest. She opened the door and froze. In front of her, with gentle eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, stood Michael Ellington, one of America's most prominent philanthropists, founder of the National Fair Labor Alliance. A man once nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his work protecting workers of color. He stood and offered his hand, smiling warmly. "Camila Brooks. It's a pleasure to meet you. You don't know what you've started." She hesitantly shook his hand, whispering, "You know who I am." Michael nodded softly. "I don't just know you. I've watched that video many times. Not for drama, but for how you held your dignity in silence. You reignited a conversation this society has avoided for too long." Camila clenched her hands, her heart torn between humility and disbelief. "I didn't think I did anything special. I just didn't want my daughter to grow up in a world where silence was the only thing she learned." Michael smiled, his eyes full of deep empathy. "That's exactly why I'm here today." He opened his leather case and placed a folder on the table. "We're about to launch a new initiative, the Dignity Project, to protect vulnerable workers from discrimination, abuse, and injustice in the workplace. And we need someone real, not a PR figure. Someone like you. Someone who truly knows what it's like to be quietly dismissed every single day." Camilla's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're asking me to be the spokesperson for this initiative?" Michael spoke earnestly. "I'm not just asking. I'm hoping. Because if your quiet words in a restaurant could move millions, imagine what you could do in front of a movement." Camila looked down. Her breath trembled. In her mind, she saw her daughter Lily's eyes asking Mom, "Why did they look at you differently than the white waitress the other day?" She looked up slowly but with growing resolve. "Yes, I'll do it. Not because I'm strong, but because I've been weak and I don't want anyone else to ever feel that way again." Michael nodded. He shook her hand again, this time like a passing of the torch. "Welcome to a new journey, Camila Brooks." The launch of the Dignity Project took place in a historic hall in downtown New York, once a stage for world leaders. But today there were no political speeches, no brand promises. Every spotlight pointed toward one name, the woman who had once been just a shadow among designer suits, Camila Brooks. On stage beneath a banner that read, "Dignity begins with one voice," Camila stood in a simple white blouse, hair neatly tied, her gaze no longer fearful, but calm and steady. In the audience sat calloused hands, janitorial uniforms, anonymous chefs, servers, and also legal scholars, media figures, and human rights advocates. Camila took the microphone. Her voice was not loud, but it silenced the room as if everyone had stopped breathing. "I used to think my dream was small to work, raise my child, and be treated like a decent human being. I never wanted fame. I never imagined that refusing one insult would reach millions. I only know this if I had stayed silent that day, all the injustices I've faced and the ones my daughter may face would continue without resistance." She paused, her eyes sweeping the room, hundreds watching, no one blinking. "I'm not a hero. I'm a mother. I'm a waitress. But I know this kindness is never a sign of weakness. And dignity is not a privilege, it is a basic right for everyone." Applause erupted, first scattered, then thunderous. The room felt like it had been washed clean by rain. Michael Ellington, seated in the front row, smiled proudly. That day, hundreds of news outlets published her speech. Schools included her video in class discussions. Corporations signed on to the Dignity Project. And the woman once dismissed for her skin color and occupation became the symbol of something simple yet powerful, the courage to rise with kindness. That night back in her small Queens apartment, Camila hugged Lily tightly. She whispered, "Your tomorrow will be different, and I promise, no one will ever make you bow your head just for being who you are." Lily smiled, then drifted to sleep in her mother's arms. Outside the window, New York buzzed as always. But for Camila Brooks, a new chapter had begun, not just for her, but for everyone who'd ever been forced to stay silent.